Chapter 1. Gülen and Kant on Inherent Human Value and Moral Dignity. The very word humanism places the human, the individual, the group of individuals, the species, the form of being, at the center of its concerns. Therefore, humanism's long claim is that human life in general, and human lives in particular, have some form of inherent human value. Moreover, respect for this inherent human value in many humanistic systems forms the starting point or grounding for fundamental morality. No one articulates this more powerfully and coherently than 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant. In his Grounding for the Metaphysics of Morals, first published in 1785, Kant attempts to articulate the supreme principle of morality. He intends to articulate this principle in completely rational, not empirical, terms in order to prevent moral actions from being dependent on circumstances, human feelings, whims, or conditions. Time and space here do not suffice to consider the merits of Kant's method or conclusions with regards to rational versus empirical ethics, or to summarize adequately the bulk of his arguments. Therefore, we will focus on those points most relevant to his discussion of human beings as ends in themselves, and as such, possessors of inherent value that must not be maligned. Kant's argument in the Grounding centers on three core concepts: reason, will, and duty. These three concepts are bound together in a very specific way, and he moves logically from one to the next in order to set up the context for his ethical philosophy. He begins with the will. The will, particularly a good will, is required for any notion of morality. Kant asserts this immediately in the first section of his essay. There is no possibility at all of thinking of anything at all in the world, or even out of it, which can be regarded as good without qualification, except a good will. Intelligence, wit, judgment, and whatever talents of the mind one might want to name are doubtless in many respects good and desirable, as are such qualities of temperament as courage, resolution, perseverance. But they can also become extremely bad and harmful if the will, which is to make use of these gifts of nature and which in its special constitution is called character, is not good. The sight of a being who is not graced by a touch of a pure and good will, but who yet enjoys an uninterrupted prosperity, can never delight a rational and impartial spectator. Thus a good will seems to constitute the indispensable condition of being even worthy of happiness. Nothing good is even possible, then, without a good will, regardless of whatever other talents or capacities a person may possess. The good will is like a basic character state and is indispensable for moral action. Kant continues his analysis by moving to the concept of reason. Reason, in his view, separates humans from animals in a general way, but more specifically, reason functions in humans in a way that illumines a more fundamental difference between humans and other living beings. Kant operates on the principle that nature designs the constitution of every organized being such that no organ exists in it that does not fulfill a purpose that it alone is designed to fulfill to the highest and best possibility. In other words, every organ has a purpose, and it fulfills that purpose better than any other organ in the living being. Kant identifies reason as a kind of organ and asks what its purpose is for human living. He says, "Now, if that being's preservation, welfare, or in a word, its happiness, were the real end of nature in the case of being, having reason and will, then nature would have hit upon a very poor arrangement in having the reason of the creature carry out this purpose. For all the actions which such a creature has to perform with this purpose in view, and the whole rule of his conduct would have been prescribed much more exactly by instinct. And the purpose in question could have been attained much more certainly by instinct than it ever can be by reason." Here, Kant asserts that the achieving of happiness defined as our preservation or welfare is not the function of reason in human beings or beings who possess will and reason. Welfare, preservation, or happiness can be achieved by instinct as much as, or even better than, by reason, as it is in animals. Therefore, Kant says that Existence has another and much more worthy purpose, for which, and not for happiness, reason is quite properly intended. Kant concludes that reason's purpose is to develop the good will. He says, reason recognizes as its highest practical function the establishment of a good will, whereby in the attainment of this end, reason is capable only of its own kind of satisfaction. What is the good will? How is it to be defined? In short, Kant defines the good will in human beings as the ability to act from duty alone and not according to any circumstances or sentiment. This definition alerts us to perhaps Kant's chief concern in his essay, and that is to find a firm grounding for morality. In his view, moral systems that focus on pleasure, happiness, or sentiments do not provide a sufficient grounding for ethics because they are transient and subject to many variables in human life. Our sentiments may change depending on circumstances. What gave us pleasure formerly may cease to bring pleasure. In the realm of mundane life and property, these variables have minimal consequence. In the realm of morality, however, they can have tremendous consequences. Inasmuch as morality guides our actions toward people, our guiding principles can change with our mood, whims, or circumstances if they are rooted in sentiment or pleasure. We may not feel like telling the truth, or being compassionate or fair in our dealings with people. For Kant, to ground morality on feelings or pleasure is to build our house on sinking sand, and thus to risk everything. Therefore, Kant seeks a more secure foundation for morality, and he believes he can find it in reason, will, and duty properly understood as they work together in human life. So, in summary, for Kant, there is no possibility for good without the good will, and reason exists in us to develop that will, which is the ability of humans to act from duty alone, regardless of feelings, circumstances, or pleasure to be gained. Kant spends most of his treatise explaining these three core concepts of reason, will, and duty, and their operation in a metaphysics of morals from which human beings can codify a supreme principle of morality to guide all deliberations and actions. This supreme principle is called the categorical imperative, which takes several forms in the treatise, the most common being, I should never act except in such a way that I can also will that my maxim should become a universal law. What does all this have to do with inherent human value? For Kant, humans, as rational beings, are possessors in their nature of the very grounding of morality, and as such, have inherent value. Outside of human beings as rational agents, there is no practical notion of the moral good, since there is no being that can determine it rationally and apply it universally other than human beings. A rational being is a being who, from within himself, determines what is the universal moral law. Such a being, who generates principles of value, is in himself a value or good. In Kant's words, rational nature exists as an end in itself. Indeed, Kant delineates a version of the categorical imperative that centers on this. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never simply as a means. He envisions a kingdom of ends, that is, a community organized around these moral principles in which human beings, as rational agents and ends in themselves, legislate universal moral law, always with a view of humans as ends in themselves, not only means. Inside Kant's kingdom of ends, things either have a price or a dignity, a market value or an inherent worth. Kant explains, whatever has a price can be replaced by something else as its equivalent. On the other hand, whatever is above all price and therefore admits of no equivalent has a dignity. Whatever has reference to general human inclinations and needs has a market price. But that which constitutes the condition under which alone something can be an end in itself has not merely a relative worth, i.e., a price, but has an intrinsic worth, i.e., a dignity. Now morality is the condition under which alone a rational being can be an end in himself, for only thereby can he be a legislating member in the kingdom of ends. Hence, morality and humanity, insofar as it is capable of morality, alone have dignity. skill and diligence in work have a market price. Wit, lively imagination, and humor have an effective price. But fidelity to promises and benevolence based on principles, not on instinct, have intrinsic worth. Human value is not negotiable. It is not a thing bought or sold, or something relative in value depending on market conditions. Kant's formulation of human being allows the human disposition to be recognized as dignity and puts it infinitely beyond all price, with which it cannot in the least be brought into competition or comparison without, as it were, violating its sanctity. He goes on to say that rational nature is distinguished from the rest of nature by the fact that it sets itself an end. Therefore, another dimension of the categorical imperative is that a rational being himself must be made the ground for all maxims of the actions, and must thus be used never merely as means, but as the supreme limiting condition in the use of all means, i.e., always at the same time as an end. As indicated above, human beings are ends in themselves, not merely a means to someone else's end. They cannot be used only as a tool to secure another's goal, agenda, or ideology. While humans may be employed in those efforts, they cannot be treated as merely employees of a project. They are always at the same time an end in themselves, bearers of inherent value and dignity, regardless of any advantage or benefit they provide to anyone else's projects or agendas. In making these claims, Kant makes radical statements for his time. In a sense, he is furthering a particular conversation in the West that began a generation or so earlier with philosophers like John Locke, who argued for a governmental structure not rooted in the divine right of a monarchy, but in the sovereign will of the governed, that is, the people of the political community. The only way such arguments become conceivable and logically consistent is if significant worth is accorded to human beings as humans. Important to note also is that Kant's articulation of human worth is not a religiously grounded one, although Kant himself was a Christian. Locke's arguments are not Christian either, despite his own faith. Both are concerned to base their arguments for human worth in non-religious terms in order to make them as immune as possible from what they saw as the whims of religion. We must remember that both men lived during periods of religious wars throughout Europe when people were put to death because their religion differed from that of the monarch who ruled by divine right, and against whom people had no recourse for a redress of grievances. Moreover, Kant is well aware of the emotionalism that often accompanies religion, and thus does not view religious faith as a stable enough grounding for moral principles, which include the inherent dignity of all people. He wrote an entire book called Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone, in which he tried to extract religious practice and conviction from pious feelings and inclinations, and instead tie it exclusively to the cultivation of a moral character and to principled ethical action. His overriding concern across his work is to underscore in the most universal way possible, which he sees as through reason which all humans possess, the inherent worth of human beings so that stable morality is possible in the world regardless of the contingencies of life, including changes of rulership, conversion to new religions, personal tastes, and the like. The Western Enlightenment, of which Kant was a part, championed these notions of inherent human dignity which brought about radical social changes in the 18th century and beyond. Of course, these ideas are not unique to the Western Enlightenment. Thinkers and writers from many parts of the world articulate such notions from within their own cultural, religious, or philosophical rubrics. Islamic scholars, for example, for centuries and from many parts of the world, have interpreted the Quran as expressing such notions about inherent human value and moral dignity. Gülen's work is an example of Islamic scholarship that emphasizes the Quranic voice, insisting upon the distinct beauty and worth of human beings. Indeed, Gülen finds in the Quran and other Islamic sources strong claims about human dignity in the first place. He does not bring such claims to the Quran after having determined them through other means or from other sources. Gülen repeatedly references portions of the Quran when responding to questions about jihad, violence, terror, and respect for human life in general, not just Muslim life. In these sections of his work, Gülen's resonance with the ideas of Kant become clear, although they most certainly develop their respective expressions of inherent human value and moral dignity from entirely different perspectives. Gülen, throughout his work, speaks of the transcendent value of human beings. He begins one piece with a powerful statement. Humans, the greatest mirror of the names, attributes, and deeds of God, are a shining mirror, a marvelous fruit of life, a source for the whole universe, a sea that appears to be a tiny drop, a sun formed as a humble seed, a great melody in spite of their insignificant physical positions, and the source for existence all contained within a small body. Humans carry a holy secret that makes them equal to the entire universe with all their wealth of character, a wealth that can be developed to excellence. He continues by claiming that all of existence becomes a legible book only with their human understanding and foresight. Humans, together with everything in and around them, are the royal witnesses of their master. He finishes this line of thinking in the section by saying, when this entire boundless universe, with all of its riches, components, and history, is connected to humanity, it becomes clear why the value of humankind transcends all. According to Islam, humans are superior merely because they are humans. So in these passages, Gülen claims the greatest value for human beings, as opposed to angels or animals, because of their capacity as witnesses and interpreters of the universe. As such witnesses, they are the mirrors of certain aspects of God, the reflectors of the divine book of the universe. Without them, the universe is not known, nor is there anyone to know it. Elsewhere, Gülen reiterates that human beings are the center and meaning of the universe, and that as such, they possess value higher even than angels. Humans, through their activities and understandings, give life its essence. He says, the human being is the essence and vital element of being, the index and core element of the universe. Human beings are at the center of creation. All other things, living or non-living, compose concentric circles around them. Taking into account all the honor that has been granted to humanity, compared with all the rest of creation, humanity must be seen as the voice that expresses the nature of things, the nature of events, and, of course, the nature of the all-powerful one, who is behind everything, as well as being understood as a heart that encompasses all the universes. With human beings, creation has found its interpreter, and matter has been distilled through the cognition of people, finding its spiritual meaning. The monitoring of things is an ability peculiar to human beings. Their being able to read and interpret the book of the universe is a privilege, and their attribution of everything to the Creator is an exceptional blessing. Their quiet introspection is contemplation. Their speech is wisdom. And their conclusive interpretation of all things is love. So whereas Kant argues for the inherent value of human beings based on their being rational agents through whom the moral law comes into practical being in the world, Gülen argues for the value of human beings based on their position as the only agents through whom God's book of creation can be known and the wonders of existence expressed. In both instances, human beings as individuals and as groups are indispensable to fundamental constituents of existence. In one case, morality through their rationality. In the other, all knowledge, wisdom, and love through their being mirrors of the names and attributes of God. Moreover, Gülen, like Kant, takes human value and dignity as the basis for defining legitimate and illegitimate behaviors toward people in society, although Gülen grounds his claims in the Quran, not in reason alone, unlike Kant. In a piece addressing human rights in Islam, he argues that Islam has the highest conception of universal human rights and that it has not been surpassed by any other religion, system, or commission. He says, Islam accepts the killing of one person as if all of humanity has been killed, for the murder of one person allows the idea that any person can be killed. Gülen qualifies this statement in a way common to most religious and philosophical thinkers, namely, that it perhaps is justified to kill those who are killing others, those trying to destroy society, and so on. In these instances, the killing is not murder. It is punishment or self-defense. Elsewhere, he says that in the Islamic view, a human being, be they man or woman, young or old, white or black, is respected, protected, and inviolate. Their belongings cannot be taken away, nor can their chastity be touched. They cannot be driven out of their native land, and their independence cannot be denied. They cannot be prevented from living in accordance with their principles either. Moreover, they are prohibited from committing such crimes against others as well. They do not have the right to inflict harm on this gift of humanity that is presented to them by God, for they only are in temporary possession of this bounty. God is the true owner of everything. Humans are to defend and keep safe this gift. It is holy for them. They will not harm it, nor allow it to come to any harm. When necessary, they will fight for it and die for it. Gülen here again ascribes human worth to God. Humanity, or human beingness, is a gift that cannot be transgressed or fouled. As such, it is the basis for obligatory positive actions, like protecting people and keeping them safe, as well as prohibitions against harmful actions, such as harming people or stealing their property. Gülen sees these harmful actions as being in direct opposition to the spirit of love, which he identifies as the central heart of Islam. He says, "Actually, love is the rose in our belief, a realm of the heart that never withers. Above all else, just as God wove the universe like a lace on the loom of love, the most magical and charming music in the bosom of existence is always love." This love translates into a basic humanism in which people develop love within themselves for others and for all creation, and show that love by support and service to the world. This is at the heart of Islam, Gülen says. Unfortunately, however, this idea has either been ignored or perverted. He explains, "Humanism is a doctrine of love and humanity which is interpreted recklessly these days, and it has a potential to be easily manipulated through different interpretations. It should be difficult to reconcile with humanism the strange behavior of championing pity and mercy for those who are involved in anarchy and terror to demolish the unity of a country, for those who have heartlessly murdered innocent people as a part of centuries-long activities that are aimed at destroying the welfare of a nation, and even more horribly, for those who do this in the name of religious values, and those who recklessly accuse Islam of allowing terrorist attacks." Gülen here points to the deep hypocrisy and violence in many modernist movements that claim to be humanist, and he mentions, in passing, those who do similar horrible things in the name of religion. In both instances, what becomes lost is the true doctrine of love and humanity, which grounds both of them in their true, authentic forms. Islam, then, in his view, shares with true humanism a commitment to love of humanity, the difference being that Islam gleans this commitment from the revelation of the Quran, whereas humanistic philosophy derives it from other sources or modes. Clearly, Gülen echoes the spirit of Kantian analysis despite coming from a completely different framework, namely the religio-philosophical worldview of Islam. The inherent value, even holiness, of humanity demands universal protection and categorically forbids any transgression of it. In the West, the ideas of Kant, and of Locke, about inherent human dignity and basic rights find their political manifestation in the liberal democracy of the modern nation-state. Muslim societies have actualized their commitment to human dignity in other ways. Despite the differences here between the West and Muslim countries, Gülen sees no inherent incompatibility between Islam and democracy in general. The basic commitments to human beings and their essential rights, albeit grounded in different starting points, one religious, the other secular, cohere with one another. Gülen, however, argues that Islam can improve democracy in important respects. Democracy in the modern period, he says, has been wedded to problematic philosophies such as dialectical materialism and historicism, which he views as fatalistic. Also, democracies can engender a rugged individualism that undermines the health of a whole society, although Gülen asserts that in Islam, all rights are important, and the rights of the individual cannot be sacrificed for the sake of society. In the end, Gülen says Islam is a comprehensive set of religiously derived principles that can guide democracy as it continues to develop and improve. He explains, "Democracy has developed over time. Just as it has gone through many different stages in the past, it will continue to evolve and improve in the future. Along the way, it will be shaped into a more humane and just system, one based on righteousness and reality. If human beings are considered as a whole, without disregarding the spiritual dimension of their existence and their spiritual needs, and without forgetting that human life is not limited to this mortal life and that all people have a great craving for eternity, democracy could reach the peak of perfection and bring even more happiness to humanity. Islamic principles of equality, tolerance, and justice can help it to do just this." Clearly, Gülen sees shortcomings in democracy that Islam can address, particularly on issues of humanity and how human beings are understood. Democracy tends to ignore the spiritual dimensions of life itself and of human nature, traits that demand universal respect and even awe of human beings. Kant might question Gülen on this, if for no other reason than to root all society, including systems of justice and morality, in a religious worldview, is to place it in the hands of something that, in Kant's view, ultimately cannot be proven rationally and certainly, falling as it does within the domain of conscience or faith, cannot be compelled without doing violence to the very humanity it seeks to defend and revere. On the other hand, Kant arguably would be pleased with the results of any religious worldview that ascribes ever more holiness and respect to human beings, such that their intrinsic worth is held as a sacred truth. He would simply say that such a worldview does not have as firm a foundation as he would like, rooted as it is in sentiments or ultimately unprovable faith. Regardless, I think it is safe to say that claims of the inherent value of moral dignity of human beings, whether made by thinkers of the Western Enlightenment, by Islamic scholars interpreting the Quran, or by others from any tradition whatsoever, are vital in today's world. The claims, in and of themselves, accomplish nothing. As history clearly shows, people may organize themselves under all manner of high and lofty banners such as humanity, human rights, the common man, and proceed to commit atrocities and even genocides against the very human beings they claim to respect. Such is the deep hypocrisy and fallibility that plagues human life. When human beings truly and authentically commit themselves, however, to such claims and determine their actions by such claims, culture and society become less savage, bloody, and brute. History, in addition to showing us persecutions and genocides, also shows us that societies that keep inherent human value at the forefront of their political and cultural existence allow a measure of peace and stability for residents and citizens, and such societies have come in all eras and places of human history. When those same societies fall into persecutions and genocides, most often it is because they have abandoned the principles of inherent human value and moral dignity. In affirming the inherent value and dignity of humanity, we also implicitly affirm the conditions that uphold and sustain that humanity. To value humanity is to commit to philosophical, spiritual, social, and political structures that cultivate that humanity and bring it through its own growth and development into its fullest actualization in individuals and groups. One of those conditions is freedom. The freedom to think, to learn, to express, and to live as one sees fit. This theme is the subject of our next chapter.